Hey, Mr. Horton, it's William Montgomery here.
Hi,
How's it?
sir. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad. Getting my paperwork in order. Just every day is a battle.
All right, sir.
But
How can I help you?
it's very hard to have conversations over voicemails. I know it's kind of a one way and then a one way and so forth and so on. But truthfully speaking, I'm just trying to get down to maybe some certain conversations points that we can agree on, and basically be able to move forward.
Mr. Montgomery, I think I can save you a lot of time. I'm not going to engage in a discussion with you about rights of way or easements or your current case. I'm investigating a specific complaint that you alleged against an officer. I'm not going to have any discussions with you about other matters.
Okay, so that's what I had the feeling of going forward here. So reading your internal affairs policy, it says very specifically that criminal and administrative investigations can be had both by other parties. I think once you have a criminal investigation, it has to be done separately than an administrative investigation. Nevertheless, it says about the way an investigation is done, that it is documented, and then basically a finding of sustained or not sustained is to be found after that. So, for instance, say the complaint I'm trying to push forward with the Brady Johnson Cutter Bruff, November 3rd, something like that, of 2015. This was park curfew eviction, or it was a park curfew ticket in North College, Gustav Swanson area. That is a complaint that I don't know yet, since of all of our conversations, if you have decided to start that or end that, or basically my concern is if it's not even written down, then how are other parties supposed to know if a finding of not sustained was found?
I'm not taking that complaint. Right now I'm investigating the prior complaint that you've made. Once that's done, I'm going to send the file up to Internal Affairs, and they can investigate further complaints that you have. You'll have to save those complaints for those officers.
Okay. So now here's this is where I'm really starting to get concerned. So, who is who in the force? Are you part of Internal Affairs?
No, sir.
Okay, I thought you were. I was referred to from Jackie and or Kinsman, or Pearson and Kinsman. Are they part of the Internal Affairs?
Sergeant Pearson is the Internal Affairs Sergeant.
Okay. That helps. And then there's also, if I recall, a professional standards unit. Is that her too?
That's right. Internal Affairs is part of the professional standards unit.
Okay. And then from there, the last thing I had was a question. Citizens Review Board is someone between them and the city manager's office, maybe?
The Citizens Review Board is a board of citizens.
Okay, so here's the issue then. Because of my paperwork, and because I wasn't able to get this out sooner, because I was half instructed to write it down, as opposed to what I found out in the policies, just to recite it, or verbal complaints. Each one of these complaints, I would have come out one by one after each one of them, after each case that we run and so forth. And so by me coming out all late like this and having a whole bunch of backlogged complaints and stuff, I feel as though that all of a sudden not all attention needs to be spent on all cases. But I don't know how else to say it. I'm trying to write things down, but each individual case is very, very important. Real quick, David Kays. I was curious about that one. That one, we have him on audio apologizing for for assuming that the statute read something and it didn't. And so he apologized, and we have it all on tape. And so that to me is an officer that definitely didn't have probable cause, because an officer would read the law and so forth. Yeah, so that's basically that, and like two or three others are situations that
they're defaming that we don't know the law.
Hey, don't worry about it. The point is that these are individual cases that are not just guilt or innocence, not just policies, but obviously it's a policy to be reading your statutes. But naturally, all of these jobs that if they don't follow their policies could result in false imprisonment. and that's a criminal charge. And so, whatever you guys want to do on your side is, let's put it this way, I don't really care either way what you guys do. I already have all the evidence I need to eventually make it to 42 USC. I just wanted to have a little bit of good faith that I could show on my side, that I tried to stop these things beforehand. I tried to address them. I tried to get some sort of reform beforehand. Because personally, I don't think that some of these things requires an auxiliary outside 42 USC judge to determine, because basically your municipal judge kind of already determined it. And so a real basic question. Let's just kind of start with this one. Regarding a lack of untruthfulness for Giddings, let's just focus just on the unlawful conduct. That whole Occupy Jefferson era, while it's one thing for Giddings to not be doing his job versus being untruthful, it's, I think, more of an issue of all the officers that night. Not necessarily not being untruthful, but not doing their jobs and not following policies. And these are the types of things that if I were to get to a 42 USC court, they're going to say the exact same thing that your municipal court did to strike it down when they did. And so I got an unlawful conduct ticket because that's county court. They didn't know the same procedures. They're very stupid. If you look at the appeal, it's pretty easy to see what happened. It was an exhibit disclosure violation. It was all hearsay. It actually should have been tossed really easily. But nevertheless, the reason I'm so concerned about trying to get an investigation open for, say, Brady that night, anybody else that was there that night, is that Occupy Jefferson, technically speaking, had nothing to do with boundary maps or finding them from the Parks Department potentially incorrectly. It technically didn't even have to do with going into your patrol map in your car and finding out the boundaries of the park. The reason why Judge Lane struck down David's ticket was because it wasn't designated, and an officer needs to obviously read what and know what a park is.
You can't have an officer out there enforcing it all the time.
Yeah, basically what she said was it can't be a selective enforcement type thing, because when they're not there, someone else might walk into the park, and so
time of the day for physical enforcement.
Yeah, and so basically what she essentially said was these boundaries aren't really well established. If the Parks Department really wants to come out with something, they need to go and update the actual street. And so it doesn't matter about a Parks Department boundary at all. I think officers of the law were told very specifically in court that day that they shouldn't have written a ticket that didn't apply to an area because it wasn't designated.
Proper designation is a Harvard law.
Yeah, so proper designation, very, very simple. I think a reasonable officer would have definitely seen that sidewalk and seen that it didn't have any designation, and maybe even refer to that map and go back to the Parks Department and say, hey, this conflicts with, it's not designated. And I think that's what happened that night later on when we talked. We called up the pizza box enjoyers. And so I don't know if it was specifically Cunningham, but I know it was Harris that night, and I can get the paperwork. But I had called in the middle of the night, and a couple of pizza box enjoyers were halfway in the park, halfway out. They went ahead and removed everyone from the park, specifically said they could stay on the sidewalk there. And I called back and I talked to dispatch, and they were pretty adamant about considering that to be street property or public property, city property as they called it.
And it's the same company.
And so regardless of park boundaries, regardless of maps and stuff, I'm trying to figure out what's the policies that were violated and how come I get a ticket and I lose, how come Dave gets a ticket and he wins, and how come pizza box enjoyers don't get tickets at all. And so that's a complaint that I'm, besides just Giddings, it's every officer that night, especially Brady, since he's also in an upcoming witness in my other court dates. But nevertheless, it's something that I'm really concerned about. Do we need to have a judge? I mean, truthfully speaking, like I said, I'll go and I'll get my 42 USC if I ever get around to it, and I've got 3 years for my statutes. But do we really need that judge in order for you guys to admit that night you should have been not referring to maps, but simply referring to designated areas as what your judge told you when she struck your tickets down?
Also, Judge Lane said that she needed to issue permit tickets.
I don't know. That's confusing. I don't know. I never actually found anything about that, David, permits wise. Nevertheless, Mr. Horton, I'm very sorry, but can you see the gist of here? We have multiple different complaints. They all kind of came around all at once in our release. They've all happened at different times, and I think they all have merits. What should I do with them all?
Mr. Montgomery, as I explained to you earlier, I'm investigating one allegation right now, your allegation against Sergeant Giddings. I'm not going to entertain any information about park boundaries or rights-of-way or easements. After I'm done with this investigation, I'm going to forward it to the Internal Affairs Department, Sergeant Pearson, and then she'll take further complaints from further officers.
Okay, so what makes this complaint from me the only complaint that can be taken right now? Am I not allowed to fill out multiple complaints?
Mr. Montgomery, you can complain all year long, whatever officers you want to, but we don't have the capacity to take all those complaints at once. Furthermore, as far as I can tell, what you do is you just read the names off the reports and then tell me you want all those people investigated. That's not reasonable. So I'm going to look at this complaint that you alleged.
But that's...
Once I've completed that investigation, I'll forward it to Sergeant Pearson, and she can decide what other complaints she's willing to entertain from you.
Okay, so what you just told me there is absolutely not in your internal affairs policy. I am definitely allowed to have multiple complaints over multiple officers that I do believe you have the capacity to take them all at once because they're all the very same exact thing, no probable cause. We already won the trials for most of them, so it's very, very simple. And also, it's just, debriefing. If I gave you a time and a date, are you telling me that you can't go just simply ask Officer Kays what he did that day? You don't even need to. I have the audio. I have the entire thing on audio. I just can't get it to you guys fast enough. But so I thought you were Internal Affairs, and I thought Internal Affairs conducted investigations and would basically start them if they're unfounded, and then end them really quickly if they're unfounded. Okay, so where is David Kays going to get investigated? How and when?
Do I need to personally open it up?
Does David need to? Because it was actually technically against him. And by the way, does that mean there's not enough time for both of our complaints to be out there? Or is it just one complaint per person? Because technically that was David that got moved along. So maybe we need to attach a different name to that so that we can get that one started separately.
Hi, I'm David.
That's David over there.
So, Mr. Montgomery, after I finish investigating your allegation on Sergeant Giddings, then I will forward the results of my investigation to Sergeant Pearson, and she will contact you, explain the results of that investigation, and try to decipher what your further complaints are against which officers.
Okay, so Pearson, does she know about any other complaints of mine?
She's aware that you're wanting to make multiple complaints against multiple officers. Those complaints will be taken and investigated after I finish this investigation.
Okay, so why did you accept this complaint first? It's actually not even the first complaint in our list.
Mr. Montgomery, I'm investigating the case that I was given. I don't know about your history with other cases and other complaints.
Okay, to clarify, I never specifically gave you that case. I had talked about a lot of them, and then you said that was the only one that you would go ahead and investigate. I have a bunch of man. This is getting bad. Okay, so the thing that I really need from you guys, it's really basic. There's let's just focus on 3 situations because they're all the same, and they keep going down the same way. And so when you're investigating, if you only think you can only do just the Occupy Jefferson for me. It's not just Giddings, it's everyone that night, and that's also everyone that night not using designations, that part of their policy, not using maps, obviously. But the untruthfulness is only one factor, and that's not the only factor that you guys need to or can investigate. The gist of it, let me put it this way. If I have to get other people to investigate these 3 things, these are probably the biggest 3 that I kind of figured out. They're all the same themes. So the 3 dates are Occupy Jefferson, and then that park curfew eviction North College, and then the third one is the trespassing fence area. just to compare these three to each other to get you an idea of why I can't just have one investigate. In a nutshell, every time all these three, they have the same ones, same variables, and it was us being responsible using maps beforehand. Once we show up in the area, the officers that are there show up after the fact. They claim that they're using maps. They tell us to basically the exact same way every time, which is save it for court. I was told to save a map for court. I was told to save an argument for court in Occupy Jefferson, and I was told to save that email for court in the trespassing. And basically every time so far I've saved it for court, I've won, except for unlawful conduct. But that's because it was a judge that allowed it in when they shouldn't have. So that's an even bigger problem. But nevertheless, David got his dropped. And so the theme here is, if you actually look at the video footage for Parker View North eviction, or North College, and then you look at that video footage for the Occupy Jefferson, you can kind of see the same theme going on here of the officers in the trespassing case. It's blatant disregard for the truth. It's reckless disregard for the truth. It's not giving us the time of day. It's not good faith in the sense that, we offered a map, they offered a map, and they didn't use it. They wouldn't let us use it on the streets. Park curfew, North College, and basically, every time that they say save it for court, it's a protocol to basically not finish their investigation, claim that that it's not something they need to know. Like Giddings, he said, I've never really had much experience with right-of-way law. I don't need to know it, kind of thing. And basically, it's a tactic that we've noticed to minimize any sort of exposure to stiff people, and it ultimately, what really concerns me is it is improperly affecting other people through attempting to influence. And so the really big thing about the fence that worries me the most is when an officer or someone else says that they would also have probable cause that night. But a lot of things were left out of that police report. I mentioned right of way.
I was completely not mentioned anywhere in there.
Yeah, you an email was given from you. That's all. But nevertheless, the fence issue is where I'm really concerned, because I gotta get those. Let me slow down, get the right words to it. The email that I gave them was specific enough that it had more evidence on it than whatever they thought that they could issue otherwise. And they left out that email in the warrantless arrest affidavit. That's where you probably are getting a little bit confused, maybe, with regards to how you need to say, like you said one time, that you would write the same ticket to have a judge sign off on that, or rule on that, as you said, I believe. That's actually true, and that's actually what you guys should have presented to that warrantless arrest affidavit signing judge. And since they signed off on something with 460 without looking at a map themselves, without mentioning of an email, without mentioning of me saying right of way or anything like that, the most concerning thing of all is that this judge signed off on it with rubber stamping it, and now the DA's office has signed off on it. And the number one crime with that, I have to get this out, because it's the same with Occupy Jefferson, it's the same with everything else. The way these cops are getting out of not looking bad is basically defaming me. And in that email, in the police report for the fence area, when you read it, you may have glazed over the one sentence of something like, yeah, William said it was he agreed with us that it was some Safeway fence issue. They meant to keep him out. They were putting words in my mouth. I never said Safeway once. Never considered it Safeway. I was always very clear about it being Eric Holstable's illegally put up fence in the right of way. And so when that information gets left out and I get defamed, that's actually a lie. That's what he put in that police report. Guilt of an omission is one thing, leaving things out, but then actually writing down that I thought that was that, and
that's a lie.
It was just a straight up lie, and the kind of lie that Internal Affairs should be investigating, that they should be understanding on for my other cases too. It's the lying to cover yourself up that you won't look bad. And so if you look at Park Curfew North College, they lied about using maps because they didn't want to look bad, that we called them out on it, And so while you believe there may be probable cause there for the trespassing, strange things happened. And so now I'm banned from a sidewalk that no one else has any issues with regards to if it's defined as a sidewalk or not. Kinsman was very clear about it being public. Rob Mosby was very, very clear about it being public, so much to the point where he sent a surveyor and got the takedown notice sent. And so, you guys can kind of, I've already seen it before, where as long as you don't recognize the crime, you don't have to associate with it or learn from it or anything like that. But maybe, let's just start with this. All those other cases, I'll have to write down because evidently you guys don't want them on a all level. It's whatever. I had a lot of questions in our voicemails. I think I just want to get to some basics real quick. You guys, you say you won't talk to me about right of way because maybe it's something to do with my guilt or innocence of the cases that you don't want to compromise or racketeer with me or anything like that. But there are some things that I think can be absolutely decided outside of court. And so you said you would write a ticket that day for trespassing. There's not a fence there anymore, and so that's not really a valid argument. So there's two different arguments that I can run by you now. There's the bench area itself, which is kind of filled in with rocks right now. There's no fence around it. And then there's the actual Safeway property, 460, with some other businesses in there. I don't know which I'm banned from. One law is telling me that I'm banned from just the right of way, or where I was that night. But obviously the paperwork says I'm banned from 460. And so my goal, like I tried once, but it was poorly planned, I guess, with the cops on the streets live. My goal was to try and get some sort of confirmation, either negative or positive, that I'm not allowed from that bench area anymore. And so to start there, would you be willing to meet me in that east side of Safeway area and issue me a protection order violation? Or is that not a go for you?
We've already had that discussion, Mr. Montgomery. My role in this is to investigate your allegations against Sergeant Giddings, and I want to forward my findings to Sergeant Pearson. She'll talk to you more about other interactions that you've had with the police department. We're not going to get involved in matters that relate to the appeal of your cases.
Okay.
Rights of way or easement or anything of that nature. You're just going to have to wait for the results of the investigation and of your trial and of your appeal.
Okay, I just literally told you that I'm willing to break the law and that you're now saying that you will not go ahead and issue me a protection order violation. This has nothing to do with court. I'm going into Safeway and I'm committing social suicide. This has nothing to do with court. Are you going to issue me that citation or not?
No, Mr. Montgomery, I'm not going to come see you at Safeway.
Oh my gosh.
Follow all of the laws. Follow your restraining orders to the best of your ability.
Okay, so are you telling me that you will not be enforcing my protection order?
Mr. Montgomery, I won't be assisting you with any matters related to anything other than Sergeant Giddings and your allegations you made against him. I don't know how else I can explain that to you.
Okay, then is it possible for me to get another officer out there then that would be willing to do their job on that isn't compromised or stuck or hands tied like you with this one case?
Mr. Montgomery, we're not going to entertain any of this conversation that you're having about 460 South or about property rights or about easements or about all of the officers that you want to complain about right now.
I'm not actually complaining about any officers. I'm literally trying to get
about your allegations against Sergeant Giddings, and then I'll forward my results to Sergeant Pearson, and she will contact you and take further information from you about other complaints and try to help you with your restraining orders and your issues about rights of way and easements in 460 South College. How much more clear can I be about that?
Let's put it this way. I wasn't under the impression that you were. I was under the impression that you were the internal affairs person that I could speak to get all my other issues resolved. It looks like you're not even the right person to be talking to. And did Jackie have you call me? Was that an instruction?
Mr. Montgomery, you called me today.
Okay, I'm just saying. Kinsman, I left a voicemail for Kinsman, and eventually you called me back. I'm trying to figure out who else knows about what cases. Because when you say you'll forward on to Jackie, does she know that there are other cases right now?
Yes, so she's aware that you made allegations against many police officers.
Okay, so when you guys say many, how many? Where? What are their names? Why haven't they been written down? And like, how is this something that needs to be like? What I'm trying to get at is she hasn't called me back, and I keep having to leave voicemails for people because I can't get to the paperwork. And now you're telling me that I have to wait. That the only thing that can be done is just Giddings.
Mr. Montgomery, the last long phone call we had, you said you had 1,000 charges against 31 police officers. You've mentioned individual names of maybe 10 of them. None of those complaints will be taken until we evaluate your complaint against Sergeant Giddings. I'll forward the results of that investigation to Sergeant Pearson. She'll contact you and come up with a plan for how we will deal with the other 31 officers you want to complain about.
Okay. So, a lot of the officers in that mention was, by the way, outside of jurisdiction. Some of them with other jurisdictions. The actual number of charges, 1,000 charges, is maybe 400 or so for Fort Collins. Little charges, big charges, whatever. But what I'm trying to get here is, what are you trying to tell me that I will be unable to have any of my other complaints investigated until this one is addressed?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so this is a one in, one out type thing. You won't be able to take additional investigations until this one is concluded.
Yes, sir. I don't think that'll be the case going forward, but we need to establish the basics of all of your complaints. I think stem around Jefferson Park and around 460 South College. So I'm going to get as comprehensive as a review I can of those cases and the officer's actions. After I make a finding about Sergeant Giddings' case, your allegation there, then I think we'll be better able to evaluate the complaints against the other 31 police officers that you have.
Actually, okay, so I'm really glad you said that. The reason why it seems now that I guess you guys might be taking Occupy Jefferson and the 460 is because it seems like maybe what you're trying to say is that they have the most grease. So the squeakiest wheel gets the grease. Or they're squeaky wheels, they get the grease. I think that we've all gotten on the wrong foot as far as starting off this type of conversation. I don't emphasize any case over another case. Every case is a case of false imprisonment, and every officer was not doing their job, and within the realm of needing to do their job. Occupy Jefferson isn't any bigger than David Kay's. The reason why I say this is because David Kay's, the officers, park curfew that night, Giddings, Brady, Howard, Chernak, all the officers in our other municipalities, Westminster, North Glen, Federal Heights, so forth, down here in Denver, they're all the same type of behavior of, how would I put this, no due process, some sort of type of homeless or related discrimination of lesser people, basically not reading the statutes going out beforehand, and basically dehumanizing the person when they claim that they know what they're doing, and then basically lying and covering up in court. And so this is like a theme here that I think you would need to take into account David Kay's ticket so that you can understand why and how someone like Giddings would do what he's doing, or why and how somebody like Chernak would be doing what he's doing. Each one of these cases they're not isolated. Have you noticed we're homeless? Have you noticed that no yuppies get these tickets? Have you noticed that pizza box enjoyers don't get these tickets? So I guess I'm just shocked that you guys feel as though you can just take one thing and at a time, and it's only Giddings, and it's somehow only untruthfulness. When judge struck down that ticket for anybody that was writing that ticket that night. By the way, Giddings didn't write that ticket to David. Some other officer did.
I think it was Brady.
He said. Grosshans wrote my ticket. So yeah, sure. Giddings is the one that was put on the stand that night, or in court, whatnot. But I guess I failed. I'm really concerned because in the internal affairs policy, it definitely does not say anything about how delayed complaints can only be taken one at a time for resource purposes. If you can point me to that policy, that would be great.
Then you can shut up.
Then I would. Then you can shut up. Then I'll shut up.
Mr. Montgomery, I don't think the policy contemplates the extraordinary circumstance of a person calling and saying they have 1,000 charges against 31 police officers. Therefore, because all of those cases generally tend to revolve around 460 South College and Jefferson Park, we're going to do a thorough and complete investigation of those two incidents, and then we'll decide of the 31 police officers you want investigated, which one of those bear any legitimacy at all, and how much time we need to spend on them. After I finish my inquiry into your allegations of Sergeant Giddings, I'll forward the results of my investigation to Sergeant Pearson. She'll contact you, and you can discuss the other matters.
Okay, I see what you're trying to get at, and again, let me rephrase it. I have the actual internal affairs policy pulled up. I need to read this one link right here. It's very, very important. Giddings is not the one that I'm as concerned about. He was only he is. He's part of two situations: attempting to influence and Occupy Jefferson. The reason why I keep bringing everybody else in, especially Brady, is because of it's systemic, and it now qualifies under a different type of investigation. We need to be documenting these events for Brady especially, because it now qualifies under the early intervention system. And basically, the EIS is intended, this is 1021.3, the EIS is intended to be an employee assistance instrument which helps supervisors identify at-risk activities and behaviors in order to prevent possible employee misconduct. The EIS assists supervisors in identifying at-risk behaviors by monitoring occurrences of performance indicators and by generating alerts for supervisory assessment whenever thresholds for performance indicators are reached. Going down, performance indicators threshold, 1021.4.1. Thresholds causing an alert, which will be as follows. When an employee generates any combination of three activities in performance complaints: level 1 investigations, level 2 investigations, vehicle pursuit, or vehicle collisions involving city-owned vehicles. Okay, Brady, there's three situations now. I've mentioned Park Curvy Eviction, North College, Occupy Jefferson, and the fence. He technically is the one that should be investigated now more than Giddings, even though Giddings, obviously, you can do that. But yeah, three activities. These are three activities that I'm reporting that he has consistently been not doing his job. He was there that night when they offered maps. He was there that night when they tried to use maps. He was there that night when they said, save that for court for my email.
So he should definitely know maps.
So yeah, he knows maps more than anyways. And also he knows that we use maps. And he also knows that they offer maps and they're incorrect, and so forth. Yeah, and the fence was the last thing. So it went Occupy Jefferson, Park Curfew, then fence.
So Brady definitely knew.
So please tell me how Brady shouldn't be the one investigated now, since he is the one that reached the threshold.
So, Mr. Montgomery, I understand you have complaints against several officers, including Officer Brady and Officer Cutter and Officer Kays and Officer Hopkins and some 20 other officers. After I complete the investigation of Sergeant Giddings based on the allegations that you made, I'll forward my results to Sergeant Pearson, and then she'll contact you and evaluate the further complaints that you have and decide a path forward.
Okay, so the problem I have with not investigating these other people right now is that the whole purpose of the early intervention system was to help mitigate problems with performance issues, basically, and also elsewhere in the internal affairs policy, it says when it comes to things like bias-motivated crimes, that these are supposed to be extra specially handled, extra carefully handled. And it looks to me like Okay, so this is why I'm so concerned. One complaint at a time going through here, I don't think is going to be fast enough for you guys to understand what Giddings and Bob Percifield are doing in court right now for attempted influence for me. It's basically all these other complaints I don't have enough time to deal with, and I need to have them dealt with by the time my court comes up here, because I will be compromised and I won't have basically as much information as I should. And I think you guys should also have lots of information by then too. If we go one in, one out, is Brady going to be investigated by the time my trial comes up for this? I don't know.
I didn't say one in, one out. That was your characterization. What I said was, I'm going to investigate the allegation that you made against Sergeant Giddings. When I'm done, I'll forward the results of my investigation to Sergeant Pearson, at which time she'll contact you and evaluate the merits of your other complaints and make decisions about how to proceed. I did not say that it's one in, one out.
Okay, so the point of the one in, one out is that why is Giddings getting investigated first?
Mr. Montgomery, I was given one investigation to handle, and that's your allegation of untruthfulness against Sergeant Giddings. You cannot prioritize who you'd rather have me investigate. I was given the investigation from my deputy chief, and I'll investigate that case.
Okay, if I had never...
that case, I'll forward it to Sergeant Pearson. She'll contact you to make a plan for your other complaints.
Okay, so if I had never mentioned Giddings, then you wouldn't even know about him. You would already be taking the other complaint. So what you said there is kind of doesn't make much sense. I never specifically...
I was given the investigation of your complaint of untruthfulness against Sergeant Giddings.
Okay, the only reason why we went with Giddings was because you thought there was nothing else to investigate, and I narrowed down to the untruthfulness concept of that court. If we need to go over the audio, we can. I didn't specifically intend on that being the first and only investigation.
You left a voicemail for Sergeant Pearson, and you made the allegation against Sergeant Giddings. She forwarded that voicemail to me, and I opened the investigation on Sergeant Giddings. That's when I contacted you.
Okay. I'll have to keep working with Pearson then. It seems as though I didn't know she delegated this to you. I thought you were the internal affairs guy that could take everything and sort it out.
Sergeant Pearson will refer you back to me until I've completed the investigation of your allegations against Sergeant Giddings. After I'm completing that investigation, I'll forward the results to Sergeant Pearson. She'll contact you to make a plan about other allegations that you're making.
Okay, so I'm not allowed to make, or otherwise will not have any other investigations taken until something is sustained or found with regards to this investigation.
When I complete my investigation, I'll forward the results to Sergeant Pearson, and she'll contact you, and we can make a plan about your other complaints.
Okay, so I have to wait for a response back from this one before I can start other ones.
Yes, sir. Based on the volume and the extraordinary nature of your complaints against dozens of police officers, we're going to thoroughly investigate the facts that seem to surround all of your cases, and then we will decide how to proceed with your other investigations, with your other allegations.
Okay, so for instance, I have an allegation against Hopkins, which has nothing to do with my cases. That has to do with him out on the job right now, potentially still even be moving people along, and we can't get to him. We can't investigate that, even though it has nothing to do with me. We have to wait for my investigations to get over before that can be taken.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so if Ezra Haynes were to call in right now and complain there himself, he would have to wait for my investigations over here to complete before he gets any due process, and he's not even anything to do with me.
Sir, I don't know who Ezra Haynes is.
He's the one that was moved along.
If the victim of whatever case you're alleging would call the police department instead of you doing it on their behalf.
Oh, okay.
Either way, I'm investigating the complaint that I have in front of me on Sergeant Giddings.
Okay. Well, you look like your hands are tied, or so you say. So the most I could say is with Giddings, it wasn't untruthfulness. It was also not following the policies of not following designated areas. That has nothing to do with untruthfulness. That has, even though he still lied in court. But nevertheless, I think you should probably focus with Giddings if you're only going to do that. Thank you for doing that at least. But nevertheless, the untruthfulness here, or not untruthfulness, his job policy was to obey the law, and the law told to him by the judge was that he's not supposed to be writing tickets for places that are not designated. You can't just keep trying to bring somebody in. It's never going to work. That's what she said. Don't keep doing it, so don't do it in the first place. So if you can see that the officer didn't have probable cause that night, maybe that could help with your findings. Yeah. So, but I guess I'll just keep going down. Truthfully speaking, I was trying to get to you guys so that it wouldn't look as ugly when I release it to everyone else. But I have too much stuff, and I need too much help from other people and stuff. And so I actually thought you guys could help me. But, if you say your hands are tied and that you can't go, ask David Case what happened that day. I'm still looking through your policies here, and I literally cannot find anywhere where it says that I have to wait. So in fact, it says here, acceptance of complaints, 1020.2.3. All allegations of employment misconduct will be screened by the professional standards unit or the employee supervisor. It says, even if minor, will be entered into the internal affairs case management system. The following should be considered when taking a complaint. If the complaint is intoxicated, depending on should comment or complain about the content. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about only taking one complaint. So, okay, I'll let you go, Mr. Horton. I'm really sorry. I'll just keep trying with other people since it seems that I can't get through to you guys. But nevertheless, before I go, I just needed this as an answer for my legal evidence. There seems to be a problem in the police force with anybody lawyering up over answers that are not necessarily legal advice. And so you said you wouldn't give me this answer. I just need you to tell me that you wouldn't give me this answer. But what is the definition of right of way? Fort Collins Municipal Code definition of right of way. I'm just asking you from a citizen to an officer, not relating to anything else at this point.
Unfortunately, it does relate to all of your cases and your basic allegations about the city's role in your court and your appeal.
Just lawyer.
I will not
Man.
in conversations about rights of way, easements,
It's like
restraining
asking
orders.
a doctor what a syringe is.
My role in this is to investigate your allegations and the truthfulness against Sergeant Giddings. When I'm done, I'll forward the results of my investigation to Sergeant Pearson, and she'll contact you and you can
I gotta say something important.
discover a path forward on your other complaints.
Okay.
Just gotta finish.
Okay. This is where I have the problem with this. Just because I have other investigations opened doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to get this answer of what right of way is. I initially was asking that and only had to start talking about other cases because that's just the conversation that went down. I do not believe other cases pending affects an officer's ability to tell me this answer, and that's why I keep asking it. And see, if I were to go on to the streets, just ask a random cop, "Hey man, do you know what the definition of right of way is?" The reason why I ask it is because I already sort of half know that I'm going to get some lawyered up answer like you just gave me, where you can't determine that. You can't because I'm part of a case now, and so forth and so on. And so the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm recording this and I'm having to show this to the rest of the world now that I can't get a straight answer from people. The definition of right of way is 17-42. It's in your municipal code book. You don't need to lawyer up for it. You don't need to not give me that answer because I'm in a case against other cops. You are not doing your job because you're just not. Now, you're not even being an officer of the law, because I thought an officer of the law was supposed to uphold the laws of the land, especially his own municipal code. And so okay, so the question is if somebody random on the streets without being in cases were to ask you that question, would you give him a different answer or would you give him the same answer?
Mr. Montgomery, I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals.
I'm not. Okay, so should I have to?
I'm going to engage in a conversation.
It's not a hypothetical.
or any of the other matters that you're bringing up that relate to your current court case.
Okay, so
I'm going to investigate the allegations made of untruthfulness against Sergeant Giddings.
okay, so I went up the chain to get this answer because I thought this is what I had to do to get the answer. Regardless of other cases in general, if I were just to simply ask you, like, is it illegal to be in a park at night? Are you going to give me a lawyered up answer, or are you going to tell me that it's illegal to be in a park at night? Let's just start with that.
Look, I'm not going to entertain any conversation with you about rights of way, trespassing, easement, protection orders, or any other matter related to these cases, both from the allegations you made against the several police officers, or with your appeal or your court case.
Okay.
You have to deal with those matters in court.
Okay, like I said, I already dealt with it in court. Dave's ticket already got dropped. So, just with David's ticket, is a park that's not designated some place that someone could be ticketed in? This is David's case here. I'm not talking about mine. I'm talking about David's here.
I'm David. I'm here. I got falsely ticketed. I've been listening to all your conversations, Horton.
Is his ticket invalid?
Mr. Montgomery, I'm not going to entertain conversations with you.
Oh
It
my
was
gosh!
dropped.
It was dropped, man! It was a trick question. You're not supposed to be lawyering up over this easy of a crap answer. So that was a test, man. You're supposed to simply say, yeah, that sounds like a bad ticket. Or you're supposed to say, like, yeah, the definition of 1742 is this. You want to know why? Because those answers don't affect my court case at all. They aren't helpful or hurtful to it. It was a test to see if you guys basically lawyer up and act like a mafia. Because the whole point is I already read the definition of 1742. I don't need you to give it to me. I just needed to see if you were honestly lawyer up over it, and that if you thought that there was some reason why you didn't have to give me that answer. Personally, I don't think there is any reason on earth that an officer should not be able to whip open his book and just simply say, oh yeah, the definition of right-of-way is right here. Because that would be an emptiest, driest conversation ever, and it doesn't matter if there's cases coming up or not.
It's not subjective, it's raw data.
Yeah, it's not subjective. It's objective data. And so, the reason why I wanted to ask you that question is because, personally, you set me up by saying that you thought the cops had probable cause that night. And yes, I'm going to drill you. I'm going to drill whoever thinks that they think that private property could be abutting up next to public property, so forth and so on, when the definition of right-of-way wasn't even followed. So, thanks, but no thanks. I guess I can't find anywhere in the policies here that... I can only have one thing investigated at a time, just because I happened to come late to the table. By the way, I came late to the table because I was told that I otherwise had to write things down.
By Jerry Schreiber. And we're witness tampered.
I was told that basically that people need to wait for it, that they can't take a verbal complaint. And so if I had come up with these one at a time, I feel like I would have been treated a little differently. But since I have so many all at once, it feels like now you guys are using that stat against me, like, oh, we can't investigate this or that. No, it's actually really easy. All you have to do is just go look at the body cam footage of the park curfew eviction or North College. All you have to do is actually read the eviction or the police reports of Giddings and so forth. And truthfully, the reason why I'm trying to get all this started is because nobody wants to take a second look at the attempting to influence warrantless arrest or warrantful arrest affidavit. It's crap. The whole thing is crap. It's trumped up. It's homeless discrimination. It doesn't fit any elements. It was literally trumped up to remove homeless people. And Giddings took a comment out of context from the Occupy Jefferson time, and I just, of course I'm going to be full of cases when I am human trafficked faster than I can deal with them. Now, I've done a good job of dropping every single previous case that you guys have thrown me, except for one or two. But I have these ones coming up, and yeah, I'm told I have to do all my work on my side. Sure, I got my 42 U.S.C.J. I got my motions to dismiss and whatnot. But I don't think that I need to be doing this much work for people to be understanding that these cops are young on the force, not experienced. They claim that this big, thick book is something that is unopenable for them as to why they have to do the way they do it. And the way they do it every single time, consistently, in and out of this jurisdiction, is pick up the person first and fill in the elements later. And so, if you only want to take one case, out of context, by all means,
answer your question.
Go right ahead.
Can you hang up already and I'll answer it for you?
Sure, whatever.
Mr. Montgomery, we've spent now, after our hour and 40 minutes the other day, another 50 minutes on the phone, and we're really not going to probably get anywhere. So what would you say if we both started our weekends and just spent some time away from all this, and we get back together on Monday?
Well, sure. I'll try and get more paperwork out. Maybe I'll just leave with this. This is probably the number one crime I see going on. I see every single ticket that's ever written by every officer be looked at by their superiors as some sort of subjectively reasonable thing. I get answers like, "Oh, I would have written that ticket." But I'm also getting on the other side with other jurisdictions now, since I'm pushing forward enough, I'm getting the other answer where, I personally wouldn't write that ticket. And so there's a big difference here between subjective and objective reasonableness. And so far, what you've told me, that you'll stick up for every one of your cops on that side, you are, I think, stuck on the subjective side. And that may be what that culture in Fort Collins has taught us, the yuppies in general. But it's really, really easy. It doesn't matter how hard the cop tried that night. If he didn't know an aspect of the law and he ended up executing it wrong, the objectively reasonable person, yes, that's something that a court gets to decide. Yes, that's something that a judge gets to see. But these are situations now where I've gone to court and I've told the judge, or that I'm not in the park. I'm just simply not in the park that you guys thought I was. And then the judge simply says, "Okay, where's your map, guys?" Oh, so it looks like you didn't do your homework in the first place. And so, very reasonable, an objectively reasonable person is someone that would, if there are more tools available at their disposal, that they would use them to come up with more correct decisions. And so with Giddings, it's obviously a map and a plat, definition, right-of-way, things like that. But other times, I literally just have case upon case upon case of officers picking me up without elements, lying about them. I get the cases dropped. And so the reason I'm so concerned about this trespassing thing is every time I have other cases dropped beforehand, the city attorney or the district attorney was at least able to foresee with their imagination of what a railroad of a trial it would look like. And that's what I thought for sure I could get through with you guys for the trespassing. So while you say that there's probable cause for the officer that night, I think you need to emphasize that it's not probable cause to be decided right now. The court's still expecting me to go to court to be convicted of trespassing. Bob's still trying to actually convict me of trespassing. And Chernek's going to go on the stand and say it's actually private property. And that's potentially what could be a wrongful conviction if the jury buys it, which is what happened in unlawful conduct. And so, take it or leave it. It's all going to end up in some 42 UC court if it has to. But personally, I thought we could all be a little bit more smart about this. I don't think we need a judge to determine that the cops didn't have probable cause that night. Especially Lane already shut it down. She struck that one down. So, thank you very much for taking whatever you can. Personally, based on what I've read with the internal affairs policy, I'm going to have to now report to everyone else after this that my complaints can only be taken in a orderly fashion here. You couldn't just write everything down all at once. So I guess that's, you're going to have to uphold that reasoning in court, for why the internal affairs policy wasn't followed. So, thank you very much. Anyways, it'd be nice. Fortunately, you have a weekend off. We still have to live every day in hell. So, thanks. But no thanks. I really appreciate what you guys have done as a police force. But, I'm also human trafficked the shit out of your town, and all my time is wasted, and I got nothing to show for it, and, really, really nice when this is what happens when you exercise your rights. And so I win every time I win, but now you guys still don't believe that that I won, you think that there's some probable cause in there, tell that to Lane. She struck you down. Tell that to Bob. He struck you down. So anyways, I'm sorry. Rambling now. Thank you very much. It's not necessarily truthfulness. It's not using a designated area. That's no probable cause because people are supposed to be using designated areas for parks, regardless of maps. I think that's a really easy one now. Please go talk to Bob or Lane about that one.
So. Well, Mr. Montgomery, I do hope you have a good weekend, and we'll try to get the allegations against Sergeant Giddings wrapped up as quickly as I can.
All right, thank you very much. We'll talk to you next time.